All right. So you're welcome to ask questions. Just raise your hand. Please be available in case Jackie has any questions for you. And because it's learner engagement, please ask the necessary questions and please do drill Jackie on her work and let's see how much information we can get through. All right, Jackie, are you available?
Cool, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you see the slide? Is it showing?
Yep. I'm sorry, I'm going to be keeping my camera off. I'm literally sitting in my car because it's the only private space I get in my home. So in order to not be interrupted by a child, I
Yeah.
am I'm sitting in the car. So sorry, you're not going to see my face while I'm teaching, because I'm sitting in the dark. But
No problem.
yeah.
Okay, no problem.
So
Get started whenever you're ready.
uh, cool. So I'm wanting to talk about being a trauma-informed social worker. um, I find in the foster care world and working with children from hard places in the different ways that I do, that it's very hard to find social workers, doctors, nurses, therapists who are trauma informed, who understand how trauma affects the brain development, especially of children, and and therefore the fact that you have to work with children who come from hard places in a different way. And I just thought, with us being a social work class, that this would be critical, because we desperately need um, a new generation of social workers who are able to uh, be trauma informed and able to work with children in effective ways. Um, and so that was why I chose this. So, Pedro, if we can go to the next slide. It begins by understanding. Sorry. So just so you understand where I'm getting a lot of my information from. So I've trained to be to work with TBRI, which stands for Trust-Based Relational Intervention. It was developed by Karen Purvis, now Karen Purvis Institute, specifically with working with what they call children from hard places. So adopted children, foster children, children who have been in war zones, children with PTSD. She used to actually run camps, like during in America, they've got these summer camps. She used to run these summer camps specifically with children from hard places, in order to help them develop and then to teach the parents how to, take the learnings and apply them in their home. And so The Connected Child is a book there. Highly, highly, highly recommend to, I think, anyone who works with children at all should read it, but definitely as social workers or as parents. Um, the Connected Child is the first, and it's really kind of in many ways the textbook for TBRI. Um, but there is also the Connected Parent, there's the Connected Classroom for teachers, and there've been many spin-offs from this. Um, I don't know if you've ever heard of connected parenting. That's kind of the colloquial term that is often used for trust-based relational intervention. And there are courses on this as well. Trauma competent caregivers and empowered to connect, are some of the courses that are offered even in South Africa, in TBRI, and it has been absolutely life changing for us as a family. We parent completely differently now because of having this information and understanding our children, that we didn't have before. Cool. Can we have the next slide? Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you some information, and then we're going to ask some questions about it, and then I'll give you some information, and then we'll finish with a discussion. So to start with, just to understand how trauma alters brain development in children. So they've actually proven this. You can see there's a little brain scan at the bottom there. That is the comparison of a normal 3-year-old child, whatever a normal 3-year-old child is. I don't know if that such a thing exists, but let's say the average 3-year-old child, and then a 3-year-old child who's had extreme neglect. And you can see the brain is literally much smaller. There's not as much gray matter. The frontal parts are not as developed. They're big gaps in the development. They've actually proven, and all of this is just neglect, trauma, lack of attachment, unsafe caregivers, um, causes a child's brain not to develop fully. And that's because the brain develops from the bottom up. So the brain builds in layers, starting with the brainstem, which is very much your basic survival. Then onto the limbic system, which is emotion, attachment, all that kind of stuff. And only later comes to the front part of your head, like where your forehead is, which is your prefrontal cortex. That develops last, and that's your logic, your decision making, etc., etc. And funny enough, as many as you will know with teenagers, the prefrontal cortex actually is only fully developed at age 25. So, so you're in for a really long run. But the more developed your prefrontal cortex are, the more logical you're able to be, the more clearly you're able to think, the better decisions you're able to be able to make. The lower down in your brain that you go, the more survival instinct kicks in, because it's like they call it lizard brain, right? It's the fight flight area of the brain. And I'll talk a little bit more about that now. But when a child experiences a chronic stress or major trauma, the development in the lower brain regions becomes dominant because it's more developed. So they switch back into survival mode. So they don't think clearly. They don't make rational decisions. And the more that happens, the more that they get stuck in the back brain, if you want to call it, or the base of their brain. And so this can then damage or develop what we call high order functioning. So like impulse control, reasoning, empathy, things that require you to actually think, consider, you know, make decisions for the future. All of those kind of things are slower to develop, are more difficult. And this is why, and you'll see as we keep going, this is why children with trauma are often seen as problem children. They get labeled they problem children. Meanwhile, it's actually not their fault at all. It's the development of their brain and the way that trauma has actually affected their brain. So being stuck in your brain stem and your lizard brain means that we get stuck in, you probably heard the concept, fight, flight, freeze. Fawn also should be there, which is somebody who just gives up and just does whatever you say. They become the default method, the default space that a child lives in. So they're living in constant threat mode. Everything is a threat. So children, especially who've experienced a neglect or abuse or abandonment, their stress mode is hyperactive. So their amygdala, which is the fear center of their brain, is overly sensitive. And the frontal part of their brain, the calm down, the thinking logically, is underdeveloped and underused. So this means that they'll react instead of respond. So they don't stop and think and then respond calmly. They just react. Even older children, because remember, they're younger in their brain development, they can seem aggressive or anxious or can just shut down. Remember, fight, flight, freeze, or just completely out of control. And because of this traditional discipline, what we've been taught to do for discipline and things like that, or to deal with these kind of children, don't work because their brains aren't in a learning state. When you're in fear and you're in survival, you cannot learn. So the way that we describe this to children, the way we help children to understand this, is we use little animals. So we have your tiger, your meerkat, and your owl. So your tiger is your brainstem, your amygdala, and that's there to protect you. That's fight, flight, freeze. There, when there's a stress, when a lion jumps out at you, you need to be able to fight back or run. And so we call that your tiger. Sorry, that's your brainstem. The amygdala is your meerkat that's looking for danger. And so he's sitting up there and he's looking and he's checking out like what's dangerous, what's dangerous. And then your owl is your prefrontal cortex. It's your thinking brain. What happens with children who have been under severe stress is that their meerkat is on steroids. It's like on caffeine. Like everything, somebody sneezes and they jump out of their skin. And the meerkat goes, problem. And when the meerkat raises the alarm, the tiger wakes up, so they go into survival mode, and the owl flies away because the tiger and the owl can't be in the same place. So then they go into fight, and they're just fighting, and they're anxious, and they're aggressive, and it's because their little meerkat is overactive. The little meerkat has had too much danger, seen too many things, and so he's overactive, and so he keeps waking up the tiger, and the more he does that, the more the owl stays away. And so with our work with children, one of the key things we do is we get the tiger to sleep so that the owl can come back. So we have to create what we call felt safety, where the children feel safe enough for their tiger to go to sleep. Okay. Attachment is really, really critical. So attachment wires the brain for trust. A child's brain is shaped by early relationships. So if you think of a baby gets distressed for whatever reason, hungry, cold, dirty nappy, scared, whatever it is. A child gets scared, they cry. The parent's response to that cry comes, they fix the problem, the child settles. This is the attachment cycle. So they get stimulated, they cry, the parent settles them, they feel safe. Something happens, stimulus happens, they cry. And that can happen 20 or 30 times a day. And it happens over and over and over. And doing so, it wires a child's brain to go, I'm safe. I can trust the world. My voice matters. There is enough for me. Those kind of things are wired into their brain right from a tiny baby. If that is disrupted, so if a child is neglected and they cry and they cry and they cry and they cry and nobody comes, that development doesn't happen. And so they start to go, the world is unsafe. My voice doesn't matter. I cannot trust adults. There isn't ever enough. And so everything becomes a fight for survival. And so a baby like that, instead of being able to trust, be safe, and therefore grow and learn, they stick in survival mode because now they've just got to survive because they can't trust the world to help them survive. The world then consistently feels dangerous and connection is unfamiliar. Okay. The other thing to understand is neurochemistry is affected because trauma actually alters the levels of hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. They become highly elevated in the brain. Cortisol is your stress hormone. Adrenaline is your fight flight. Okay. So if it's constantly elevated, it can actually shrink your brain. So again, if you look at the picture, you see the shrunken brain. That's because there's too much cortisol. And the brain structures, especially those involved in memory and again, emotional regulation, become shrunken. And then children have problems with focusing, sleeping, calming down, bonding, all those kind of things. The good news in all of this, because that all sounds just terrible, the good news with all of this is that the brain can heal. There's a thing called neuroplasticity, neuroplasticity, which means that through constant repetition, like learning anything, if you play the piano, the first time you play it sounds terrible, but if you do it over and over, that gets rewired in your brain, and you can rewire child's brains. So in order for that to happen, children need consistent, safe, nurturing experiences, fun experiences, where there's connection, where there's predictability, where there's reliability, where there's empowerment. They can start to develop these neural pathways at any stage. It can actually happen. Okay. So that's how trauma alters the brain. Are there any questions before we move on? Good. I'm going to take that as a no. You want to
There's
go
a
on to the next?
question in the chat.
Yes. Oh, is there a question in the chat? Thank you for that. Can the same be said about traumatized adults, that this happens in their brain? So that's what we call PTSD. It's a similar kind of thing where you get stuck in the fight-flight mode. And that's why you get triggered very quickly and all those kind of things. And the same safety, it needs to be created. The difference, though, is that when this happens in a young child, the brain is developing. So it develops wrong. Whereas with adults, your brain is already developed. You should have the kind of neural pathways to be able to think rationally, even in traumatic situations and things like that. Does that make sense, Sophia? No. Okay. When you're building a child's brain builds as they grow. Okay. If it is built in an unsafe environment, the wrong neural pathways are built, or neural pathways just aren't built. So a child is not able to emotionally regulate because they don't have that pathway. It didn't develop. A child is not able to connect to somebody else and trust them because that pathway was not created. A child is not able to make wise decisions because that pathway was not created. as an adult, many of those pathways, assuming that you have been raised in a safe environment, many of those pathways will have been developed. And so you can rely on those to get out of PTSD. So that's a whole thing in and out of itself. How do you get out of PTSD as an adult? That's a whole psychological thing in and of itself. But you can rely on pathways and things that feel safe. So as an adult, you can say, okay, what makes me feel safe? You don't need somebody else to regulate you. You as an adult can start to learn to regulate yourself. You do need to go and get professional help. Okay, somebody needs to walk this through with you. But you can regulate yourself as an adult. Whereas a child, they can't necessarily get out of fight flight by themselves. They need consistent nurturing, all that kind of stuff, in order to build those pathways for the first time. Whereas an adult, you should have some pathways that you can rely on. Does that make sense now? We'll have a one-on-one. We'll chat. Okay, perfect. Okay, why this matters. It's important that when we're dealing with children from hard places, which is a lot of our work as social workers, we're able to do trauma-informed caregiving. And we're going to talk a little bit more about this now as a bit of a discussion. Understand that behavior, so what happens so often again is that these children just get labeled as bad. They're bad children, they're problem kids, they have issues, you know? But actually, it's not their fault. Their brains have not developed. And behavior can show that. Behavior is a language. It can tell you what's going on underneath. So behaviors are not necessarily a choice. People go, oh, they just throw a tantrum because they're manipulating. No, many times a child will throw a tantrum because they're simply overloaded and their brains are not functioning well. It helps you understand why connection, safety, structure, all those kind of things are essential first steps. But until you make a child safe, you can't start doing things like correcting their behavior. It doesn't work. Until a child is safe and has connections with a reliable adult, you can't expect them to do well in school, because those are higher order functions. And until the safety is there, their owl will not be around if their tiger is constantly out. That's the basic principle. But remember, the brain is plastic. It can heal with consistent nurturing, with structured routines, with predictability, and with relational interventions like TBRI. Right. Okay, some questions. Next slide. Okay, I'm just going to throw all the questions out there, and then I'm going to leave you to throw some answers at me. If you don't, I will pick on you. So how do you think this would affect you in practice? Can you think of an example where this knowledge would be necessary? What aspects of social work does this affect? And what are some good strategies then for working with traumatized children? Anyone? Okay, Shakira, I'm going to pick on you because I know you.
Can you think of an example where this knowledge would be necessary in social work?
Yes. Yes.
No, that's just my answer. In social work.
Where in social work?
So that's not the question, but anyway.
Doing what? It is.
Investigating abuse, investigating post-trauma, where the child like lost a parent or divorce, things like that.
Okay. The questions should be on the screen, Elizabeth. They should be on if you've got the screen up. Can you think of an example where this knowledge would be necessary? What aspects of social work does this affect? And what are some good strategies for working with traumatized children? Molefi, are you with us?
Yes, I am with you. This is a little bit difficult.
Sorry, it's a
can you
little bit
pass?
difficult, but okay, you can pass. Absolutely. Pardon? Any thoughts? What do you think? So I'm just going to let's focus just on the third question. What do you think would be a good strategy for working with a child with trauma? Pardon, are you with us?
Oh yes. I think
Um,
what is important to work with a child who've been affected with trauma is to try to win the child's favor. Try
okay.
to, yeah, because now remember, if he's been traumatized, they don't trust anyone. So what is important
Yes.
is for you to act calm and to show that I
Yes.
am with you, and I'm accepting whatever the situation that you are, and it's important for you as a child as well to come together with me so that we can work and be sure that we also can be able to be assisted in that regard. I think the most important thing is to gain trust on that child by showing sympathy to say, I understand the situation and so on. Yes.
Okay. I love that. So you're creating trust with the child. That's so important. Lisbeth, what do you think as a social worker?
I think this information is very important in the field as a social work. It will help you to firstly understand your client. So if you're able to understand your client and understand where, like how far she is, whatever challenges that she or he has encountered, at least you'll be able to come up with the strategies to say, okay, if my client is like this, then I'll have to invite counseling skills or advanced counseling skills. So it's very much important to be aware of what the client is going through, and whatever if that is happening around the client.
Yeah. Okay. Lovely.
Can I also come in?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think once more is to deal with the emotional being of the child, because that is very important.
Okay.
Because dealing with the emotions, taking care of the emotions will also assist in that regard. I think maybe just to add to what had been said. Yes.
Okay. So if policemen find a 6-year-old on the street, sort of that sort of age, little boy, they bring him to the social work officers, and he goes wild and just starts tearing up things and running around and kicking and biting anyone who comes near him. Would giving him a hiding be a good way to stop it?
No. I can't give him a
Please say
hiding.
no.
Maybe.
Please say no, everybody. Maybe. No, Shakir. No. No.
Neuro-linguistic programming. The child will automatically understand that I did wrong.
No, you are adding to the trauma.
Showing
Okay.
the gun.
Pardon?
Show him the policeman's gun.
Show him the policeman's gun. Okay. Loving this. You guys are doing so well. Clearly, we're just winning on every level. Understanding that the behavior is a picture of where they're at. So in whatever case, when you find a child, when you are working with a child, to understand that trauma can be impacting their behavior, that it's not just I'm going to be angry and screw everyone because they're all awful and I'm going to be the most horrible child possible, but rather it's because of what's happened before. It's because of how their brains developed. It's because of the chemicals and the being stuck in a survival mode that a lot of these behaviors can be seen. So I will give you an example. One of our children we got him at a year old, weighing 3 kilograms. So severe neglect, right? And he had what we call, when in this work, we call dead eyes. So his eyes are open and he's alive, but there's no interaction. There's no sound. He doesn't cry. He doesn't try talk. I mean, at that point, he couldn't even roll over. But it looked like he was either deaf or autistic. And for the next probably 6 months, that's how it appeared. And you could look at a child like that and go, oh, they're brain damaged. Oh, they this. Oh, they that. And we can make assumptions. Whereas when you understand how the wiring of the brain has happened, you understand that this child probably has cried and cried and cried and cried, and nobody came. And so what do? They stop crying because they've learned that crying doesn't help. The child is not taking in any information because they haven't been in a stimulating environment where they can take in information. So they stop taking in information. Shakir?
Another example of this will come from animals. Animals, when you
Yes.
nurture them from when they're babies and nesting and things like that, you're inseparable. They just become close to you. Even if you release a lion into the jungle, when you come back and call it, like, what's his name? Lion King, I can't remember his name. But anyway, you
Yeah.
call him from,
I get it, whatever.
he will come running to you, but in a playing form, not as a wild animal. So some of the children, the more you nurture them, the more close they get to you.
Yes. Yes. Thank you, Shakir. That's the attachment thing. And it's so critical. Attachment is like one of the basic building blocks in a child's development, because without attachment, they can't build effective relationships. And that's where, I mean, should probably do a whole study on it as well, on the different attachment styles, where you've got avoidant, you've got disorganized, you've got secure, you've got anxious, are the 4 different attachment styles. And when a child doesn't have a good attachment, isn't taught how to have a good attachment as a little baby, as a little one, they then grow up into adults who are unable to have effective relationships. They don't trust their partners. They become very clingy. It affects them their whole lives. And so the things that are happening in their first 3 years of their life is absolutely critical. Elizabeth, I see you've unmuted. Elizabeth? Okay. I'm going to carry on. So I'm going to just show you the basic TBRI principles, and then we'll give some very, very practical kind of tips of how to deal with actual practical sort of situations and stuff. So if we can go to the next slide. Okay, so the concept of TBRI, trust-based relational intervention, is you empower, connect, correct, in that order. You can't build connection if a child is starving. So the empowerment is to get them, their bodies, their everything, into a good place so that you can then build relationship. And once there's good relationship, then you can worry about behavior. If a child is starving, they'll do whatever you ask them to do for food. Do you know what I mean? Like you can't build without those basic building blocks. It has to go in that order. So the first thing in terms of empowering is you have to put as much in place as possible so the child can succeed. So that means if a child is, the basic needs, if a child is starving, you get them food and you get them good nutrition, because the lack of nutrition can actually have damaged stuff. So with the little guy that we got who was 3 kilograms, we had to work a whole lot on proteins. There was a lot we had to do to put the nutritional building blocks in place so that his brain could get to a place so that he could start learning, building relationships and seeing the world. But until that was established, that he was feeding well, because I mean at that point there was no solids, he was on milk, at a year old. So we had to get him feeding well, get him onto good solid food, get proteins going, get the right vitamins into him. We had to make sure he had all his medication because he had multiple medical issues. We had to make sure he was safe and warm and had a constant routine so that his body could relax. His body wasn't fighting anymore, so that he could start to actually see the world. And that's what it means to empower. That it
Okay.
starts right there with little ones. Hello, Sophia.
Can I say kind of like
Yeah.
the Maslow's hierarchy theory
Yes,
come into
yes,
play first?
exactly. Absolutely. So the hierarchy of needs is absolutely it. That until you've got the basic structures in place, nothing more will happen. Thank you, Sophia. Understand though that the empowerment becomes a way of life even later on. So I have a household of traumatized children. We have learned that there's certain times of the day or certain times in life or whatever where they are at risk, not because the situation is necessarily bad or dangerous or anything like that, but simply because their bodies are not in a good space. So, for example, I fetch children from school. Children being fetched from school are miserable. Why? Because they've had to behave all day in school, their blood sugar is low, they're generally dehydrated, etc., etc. It's actually got nothing to do with the situation. It's simply where their bodies are at when you fetch them from school, and they're tired. And so what happens is you go fetch them from school, you stick a whole bunch of traumatized, exhausted kids in the car, and what happens? We land up fighting and screaming at each other, and it's awful. So what we do in our house, for example, is we always have water in the car to sort out the dehydration, and they all get a sucky sweet. Why? It boosts their blood sugar. They get a sweet, so they're happy, keeps their mouths busy. Sucking is a calming activity, so it calms down their nervous system, right? And so that is what empowering is. It's going, I recognize that in this situation, you are not going to be at your best because of where your body is. Let us put all the structures in place, as many structures in place, so that we can prevent this from becoming a bigger problem. Because once the fighting starts, then it becomes a relational thing, then it becomes a behavior thing that you don't need to even get there if you can empower them first. All right. So it goes all the way from dealing with a neglected, traumatized child. You know, when you get a child from an abusive situation, whatever, the first thing you have to do is sort out food, safety, warmth, cleanliness, you know, predictability. And only once that is in place, then you work on connection. So that's when you need to start building a relationship. Okay. So the attachment cycle, do you remember the attachment cycle with a baby? A baby cries, bottle, they get given a bottle, they trust. A baby cries, bottle, they trust, they cry, and so it goes on. What's been so interesting with taking in children, we've taken in children at a variety of ages. You know, we've taken in from tiny baby, 1 year old, 10 years old, and 17 years old. We've literally taken them at every stage of life. And what's so interesting is they move into our house and we go through the attachment cycle. So what that can look like with one of my kids, for example, is that she called me all the time. She was a teenager, no, preteen. She was about 11. And she would 20 million times a day just go, Mom, Mom, Mom. It was insane. And I'd go to her and I'd be like, yeah, what? And she'd be like, oh, yeah, I just wanted to show you that I was painting. And you go, cool, okay. And then you carry on. And we'd do this over and over. And I realized quite quickly she was forming the attachment cycle, just in a teenage sense. One of my other teenagers, who I took in as a teenager, WhatsApped me like 30 times a day, just going, hey. And I'd be like, hi. Even if she was in the same house as me, she just dropped me a WhatsApp. And it's the attachment cycle is saying, if I reach out, will you respond? If I reach out, will you respond? You have to build a relationship with a child if you're going to be doing anything with them. So in terms of a social worker, so we've dealt, you know, with empowerment as a social worker. With a social worker, if you're going to be working with a child, often your input is short term. And so building a meaningful relationship can be really tricky. So what you're wanting to do, though, is you're wanting them to be put into a space where they can build a relationship with somebody, whether that be a foster parent, place a safety parent, etc., etc. Sophia, yeah?
So in the examples that you gave, It
Yeah.
was them reaching out to you, testing the grounds, waiting for a response, seeking to attachment, right?
Yeah.
What do you do
Yeah.
in case a person that doesn't reach out, that just sits back, doesn't try or minimally responds just to the yes, no, and
So
utmost best to into the extra, trying the utmost best to find out what intrigues them, and there's just no response for like forever. What then? How do you keep that momentum going?
so let me talk about this in two ways. So as a social worker, that's, as I say, it's very tricky because with as a social worker, your input is short. So unless you're going to be counseling the child or journeying with the child, which is not often what I feel happens. But if you are, then you can work on this. But you need to be putting them in a place where this happens. For like our 1-year-old, they didn't even cry, remember, for like 6 months. And so we were consistent. We consistently showed up. We were absolutely predictable in the number of times when we showed up. We always would show up. If it's an older child, we say we're going to be here, we're there, and it's a consistent showing up. I'd find ways to check in. I remember my first foster kid was a 16-year-old who was suicidal and moved into a house, was absolutely silent, whatever. And every day when she got home from school, I would go and just sit on her bed for like 15 minutes, even if we didn't talk. Every day I sat on her bed, and she knew every day mom's going to come in and sit on the bed. And slowly over time, that became quite a precious space, but it was just the consistency. And so then they start learning that they can ask for it and they can trust it. Does that answer your question, Sophia?
It does. In I'm finding it difficult. Because yeah, I'm dealing with a lot of biological and non-biological teenagers. Maybe it's just the phase. They don't want to connect, and they see your as an irritation, or as this on the private space, and intrusion into their private space, you know. And so because the I also have gone into a comfort zone where, like, if you're good, I'm good. Good night, goodbye. You know, and I think it's unhealthy. And yeah, I need to work on that.
So a really good way is to date your children. I know I got into big trouble for saying this before, but to set up times where you individually spend some time with your kid, and you figure out what that looks like for each child. So what they like, and it doesn't have to be a deep, like we have these deep, meaningful conversations every day. But with this one, when I fetch her from gymnastics, we grab an ice cream together. With this one, I lie on the bed every night with him and we watch videos together. With this one, I do this. You know, they each have their own little space that, should they at any point want to go, hey, mum, so this weird thing happened at school, they know where they're going to find me, because they know, you know what? I know that I've got mom at this point. I know she'll be there.
Does that make sense? It just comes to some of us like you, for example, because I mean, like,
no, it does not come naturally. It's hard work.
When Shakir and I tried it first, like we were asked, like, are you guys okay? Are you dying? Are you sick? Are you divorcing? What's going on? And we were like, no, we want to talk to you. And it's been, I think, 7 years, and it's still just the same. They only speak on a need to know basis, or because of finances, they want money.
Yeah. Always the money thing.
Can I come in?
Yeah.
the generation at large at the moment is a TikTok generation. So it's not necessarily a disconnection. It's just something they're staying away. You know, they got other means to keep themselves busy and not feel sorry for themselves or whatever the case is. However, TikTok can be, or whatever other platform, it can be harmful to them. So we got to set, and I love this word here, dates with our children. As the partners, husband and wife would go on a date, set a date with their child, and it shouldn't be something formal. Make it an informal thing. Let's just go out, whether it's to buy bread or whether it's go to the movies, whatever the case is. But make that effort, and like you say, also just show up.
Yeah.
Done.
Absolutely. It's consistency. It's just consistency. I've got one kid that we have our most meaningful conversations over WhatsApp. She won't come and talk to me face to face, but we'll WhatsApp. She can tell me all sorts of things. So I think you find with each of your children, you find what works for them. And we don't always get it right, but it's the consistency and the level of trying. I'm going to talk a bit about playfulness. But those kind of things are that you cannot discipline effectively without the relationship. That's basically the key. We don't trying to address poor behavior is problematic if there's no relationship there, because then they just become resentful and you can't actually move forward. Okay, so you empower first, you connect second, and then you can correct behavior. And even with that, there's a difference between coaching and discipline, and between helping and punishment. We've been brought up in a generation where you do something wrong, you get beaten. That's it. Like, sorry for you. But that actually teaches them nothing. Or if anything, it teaches them that violence is the answer, which is not what we want to be teaching them. So you use rather coaching techniques instead of punitive techniques. So I'll have a child walk in who'll be snarky, Mom, where's the lunch? And I go, oh, that sounded a bit harsh. Won't you pop outside again and walk in and try to do that differently? Oh,
like
fine. That. And then they walk out and they go, Mom, please can I have lunch? I'm like, oh, still a little like sarcastic. And you can actually begin to play with it. So we do a lot of redos, just like, don't like that. Let's try that one again. Oh, somebody like got up on the wrong side of the bed. Let's try that again, and you can be playful with them. Please note the timing when you do that. If a child's in a very bad state, you don't do that. That's when you start to regulate them. You move into their space. You lower your voice, all that kind of stuff. I'll talk about that now. But if it's just a case of then you go back and you get them to do it nicely. Okay. So instead of yelling at them, instead of punishing them, instead of those sort of things, to be able to teach them the right way to do things, especially with little children. With little children, you can actually play games of, hey, let's play a game of how you ask for food. So I'm going to be in the kitchen and you do this whole make-believe thing. I'm going to be in the kitchen. I'm going to have something and you're going to walk in and, and you can play with them where you act it out. So you walk in and you go, hey, Mom, where's the food? And the kids will think you're hilariously funny. And they'll go, no, you can't do it that way. And you go, well, why can't I do it that way? And you can make it even worse. You know what I mean? You can make a whole thing of it. And then you go, okay, do you think you can show me how to do it right? Then they can. The minute you make it a game, the minute you're coaching them, the minute you're showing them, giving them the right words, that kind of thing, they're learning. And especially if they're in a playful space and a playful state of mind, their brains are then in a learning space. We are so quick to say no. We're so quick to demean, to criticize, to punish, that we don't allow for them to actually learn. A lot of them, especially children from hard places, will arrive not knowing the right way to do things. So for a child who's doing it for the first time or whatever, I say, hey, but let's try, hi mom, how was your day? So we used to have a thing where I fetch the kids from school and they'd climb in the car and be like, remember the sweet thing? They'd be like, where's my sweet? And I'd be like, no, wow. Sure, that's not the great way to start. Let's start with, hi mom, how was your day? Oh, hi mom, how was your day? Oh, thank you. My day was actually really busy. Thank you. How was your day? The day was fine. Can we have a sweet now? Yes, you may have a sweet now. And it's so funny because every single time they climb in the car now, they go, hey mom, how was your day? They always start with it, like intrinsically there. So you actually give them the words that you want them to say, just like you would say to a 2-year-old, say please, say thank you. In the same way, you can do that even with older children. So coaching and giving them the right way to do it instead of just punishing them for the wrong way is incredibly helpful. And then the concept of just lowering the bar, is that sometimes we expect things of our traumatized children that they literally cannot achieve. So I'll use a stupid example. I mean, you can't take a child in who has been in an incredibly traumatic situation, stick them in a school and just expect them to get 80s and 90%. The same in behavior. We can't stick them in a home and suddenly expect them to never swear, to treat everybody with kindness, blah, blah. It's not realistic. And when we set the bar that high, they're going to fail. And then they fail, the relationship is broken. You want to empower them as much as possible to grow and to learn. And so you lower the bar to the level that they can manage so that they can succeed. You want them to win. You want them to get it right. So you don't expect them to never scream. But what we do start doing is we start going, okay, when we scream, we're going to do this. And you make it at a level that they can understand and they can achieve it. All right. So, final slide. Let's just get practical quickly. Hi, Sophia.
Huh?
Hi.
No.
Oh, I just saw you unmuted.
No. I was just something, but let me see. This is the final slide. Let me save it for afterwards. Carry on.
Okay. So this is my final slide, and then we'll brainstorm some more ideas. These are just a couple of ideas that are really, really helpful. So the first thing that you have to do is create safety. As we said this before, ways you create safety. You you don't yell and scream at a child who is traumatized. You don't beat children who come from places, children from hard places. Ever. When you see that they are dysregulated, when they're in a stressful situation, you become the safety, you become the calming factor. You immediately go quiet. You calm, you soften your voice. When I go and fetch a child, and a brand new child, they will always have a big fluffy blanket that is theirs forever. It's like one of the first things we buy for them. We'll often do things like, especially with older children, obviously it's different with babies, but with older children, we'd make them something like hot chocolate. We'd use things like sake sweets. We would create a space for them in the home where they can be away from people if they want to. And when I take in a new child, I'll be very available for them to attach to me if that becomes necessary. So we had a place of safety little girl, 4-year-old, for 2 months. And this child literally was physically attached to me all the time because that's what she needed. So she would be holding onto my jeans or sitting on my lap or sleeping on me because that was the safety that she required at that moment. So your primary job when you work with children from high places is to create safety. I'm going to just jump play. I'll come back to play, but to talk about meltdowns and tantrums. When a child is throwing a tantrum, our default and what we've been taught with discipline is that you discipline them. They're bad. They're throwing a tantrum. They're screaming at you. And so what you do is you scream back and everybody just gets louder and more dysregulated. So, for example, your 4-year-old is going out to the car and you've asked them to get their shoes. They don't have their shoes and they're screaming at you now. They will not wear their shoes. At that point, you have a choice. You can scream back at them. I am the parent. You will get your shoes. And they will not get the shoes. And everybody just starts. you know, and they always throw tantrums at the best possible moments, you know, like where you are late and you have a deadline and you do not have time for it. That is the moment, possibly because they're actually picking up on your stress, that they will then throw a tantrum. Children don't throw tantrums because they want to. They throw them because they are overwhelmed with an emotion that they cannot control. And so what you have to do is you have to give them your calm. So instead of adding to the chaos, you bring in the calm. So if you've got a child who comes in, who starts acting out, as a social worker, you don't scream, you don't let the parents scream, you calm the situation. And what that looks like is you lower your voice, you slow down your voice, you drop to their level, because there's nothing worse than standing above a child and talking down at them. I literally will sit on the floor. So I immediately sit down on the floor and I start talking very softly. And I recognize the emotion, I identify the emotion, because that builds emotional intelligence. And I can go, sure, I see you feeling really angry about this, or this is something you really don't want to do. And this is making you feel scared, frustrated, out of control, desperate, whatever it is, you name it. You say to them, would you like me to sit here with you until you feel better? Or would you like to sit on my lap so that I can cuddle you? Would you like to cuddle? Would you like to, what would make you feel safe right now? Okay. And they and you just sit quietly and you offer your calm presence until, because remember the whole tiger, meerkat, owl, their tiger is then out. You cannot at that point start trying to reason with them. Their reasoning is gone. The owl has flown. And it's so funny watching parents trying to reason with a tantruming child, because it's useless and it's a waste of time, because children cannot reason at that point. You have to get them to a calm space so that the owl can come back, their prefrontal cortex, and then they can make a decision. So for example, the shoe analogy, I say to my son, and he used to do this, was so funny. He used to throw this massive tantrum. I'd get on the floor and go, okay, I can see you're really angry. Do you want to snuggle? And he'd say, no. But then he'd sit in my lap. And I would wrap my arms around him. And we'd wait, and I'd say, tell me when you're feeling better. I'm just going to sit here. And people go, but I don't have time for this, blah, blah, blah. It actually takes so much shorter time, because when you offer your calm, it calms them much quicker. And the more you do this, the quicker you're able to regulate them, because they become more attuned with you. And once they're calm, I then say to him, okay, so would you like to wear boots or would you like to wear tackies? So you don't let them get away with it, but you're able to regulate them enough to a point where they can make a choice. And maybe they might say to you at that point, I can't find my shoes right now, which is very different to, I will not wear your shoes. And then you say to them, hey, let's go look for them together. Or, I really don't like the shoes you gave me. Okay, are there other shoes that you want to wear? Okay. And so regulating a child from a hard place is critical. In the same way that you help regulate babies, you regulate children all the way through life. You offer your regulation to them. You give them choices. See, with that the shoe thing, okay, you don't want to wear these shoes, no problem. Let's wear these shoes. Maybe you only put your shoes on later. We can go in the car barefoot. That's fine. These children, so just talking about choices for a moment, many of these children have never had choices in their life. Everything has been done to them, often by really stupid adults. And so we work very hard to give our children as much choice as possible. What that looks like is, for a 3-year-old, you go, would you like to have supper on your green plate or your red plate? You're still going to have supper, but you get to choose the plate. What outfit would you like to wear? And generally, especially with the younger ones, you give them a choice of 2. Would you like to wear this outfit or that outfit? Would you like to sit in this car chair or that car chair? Like, all the way through the day, we give as many choices to our children, because what that does is, A, it makes their owl work. So they're working in their prefrontal cortex. They're having to think. And it develops safety. It develops all of those kind of good things. Lastly, because I can see our time is running out. Lastly, children learn when they play. This, I cannot say, I can't talk about how critical that is. And all the way from little babies all the way through to teenagers. They learn when they are playful. The more you can play with your children, the better it becomes. You can undo so many tense situations just with play. So our house can be absolutely ridiculous at times. And I will say to my boys, let's go brush teeth. And oh, we don't want to brush teeth. Right? So I go, okay. So as we go up the passage, are we going to go up the passage as tigers or as crabs or as snakes? How are you? Oh, you want to be a penguin? Okay, show me how a penguin would go and brush their teeth. And they think it's hilariously funny. And magic, we have their teeth brushed in 15 minutes. Instead of, no, you will go brush your teeth, but I don't want to brush my teeth. But it's so different. It changes the entire dynamic. If you can play act out situations that are problematic, if they don't know how to ask for things nicely, you create those playful encounters of like, hey, let's act this out. Do you think this is the right way to do it? It just disarms them and it puts their tiger to sleep, because you don't play when you're in fight flight. So in order to get into a playful mode, your tiger goes to sleep and you're using your prefrontal cortex. So one of the things that I used to do with one of my children who used to whine all the time, I wanna, but I don't want to do that. We used to pull the whines out of them. So I'd say, oh, I see that the whines have got a hold of you. Let's go and flush them down the loo. And I'd make a whole big show of pulling them out their ears and out their nose. And the more gross you can be, the better they feel. And they're hysterically laughing. And then we stomp on it, or we flush it down the loo, or we do anything. And then we go, are they all gone? Are you sure? And if they go, I say, oh, look, there's another one. Quickly, let's get it. It was so funny. I was doing this with my kitty. He must have been about 6. And I was doing it, and he was eventually laughing. And my teenager had been in such a foul mood. She was about 14 at the time, and she was just being awful. And she came and she said, can you pull my whines out as well? And we landed up having this ridiculous game with this 14-year-old where I was pulling all of these ugly things, like all the miserableness out of her, and she thought it was hilarious. And suddenly I had a kid who had gone from being absolutely surly and awful the whole day to being playful and engaged. So if you can find a way to make anything into a game or playful, so I will often, like, my one teenager is like some of yours that you talk about, you just don't get anywhere. I will walk past her room and I'll open her door and stick my head in and just stare at her. And she'll be like, yes. I'll be like, hello. How are you? And do you know what I mean? You just make it fun, and they're like, oh, mom, oh, but it's because it's fun and it's light, they engage. And so if you can use play, you can do almost anything. And I think when a child comes into your care, into your situation, whatever, that's why play therapy works so well. If you can sit down with a child and begin playing with them, with whatever, you can take off one of their socks and turn it into a sock puppet. You can begin at, whatever it is. If you can make them engage playfully, you can get them into a place of safety so much, like into a place of felt safety so much quicker. And that's me. I think I've spoken far too much. Any thoughts or questions or ideas or things that have worked or anything?
Another day for a week, so I can embody the whole Jackie.
No.
Thinking about
Oh, no.
shoes. I would have been then, well, get in the car without shoes and freeze. I don't care. Let's go. I don't know. Pedro,
Yeah.
are you here? Pedro.
Hello. Thank you so much, Jackie.
Pedro.
Yes.
You remember
Sophia has a question.
in the class earlier, I said to you that I'd like to come out of the space of management and politics and policies and all of that stuff. And I just
Yes.
want to go and paint and play and whatever. Like, I feel like we lose a lot of that
Yes.
essence that drew us to the field. The higher we go in management and in politics, those type of things. And listening to Jackie today just like reinforces what Pedro and I discussed earlier. where you just let your inner child out. Like, you don't have to care about the bills getting paid, or the Department of Health is coming to inspect or whatever. You just play, and you just let your inner child out as well. So I just wanna thank you, Jackie, because wow, I needed this, and I'm coming for a week. It's not negotiable.
My house is chaos. Malefi, are you good? How do you have any questions? Are you good?
I'm good. And this last part for some practical ideas, it was so very interesting because you put everything correctly so that one can understand how to deal with a traumatized child. So thank you so very much. And I also had my notes by the time you were giving us this presentation. So I think you did very well. Thank you so very much.
Awesome. Shakir, are you good?
I'm good. I'm thinking of sharing it with the teachers. Let's wait for the link and I will take permission.
Okay. Sure. That'll be lovely.
It'll be a hard one to top. I hope I'm not next to present. Pedro, hint, hint.
It will be a surprise thing on the day, like what I did with Jackie today.
Oh
This was
no.
literally given to me today.
No
I
pressure.
literally sat outside a gymnastics class and put this together.
Yes.
Oh no.
So, Sophia, be very nice with me because you might be next.
I'm buying you cappuccino, bro.
I see we are over time now, so thank you everyone for the lovely class. Thank you, Jackie, for your presentation on such short notice. It's highly appreciated. I see
No problem.
Elizabeth in the chat. She also said that she raised a very important point that we need to allow children also the opportunity to lead. And it's very important. It
Yes.
was very interesting to see how abuse and neglect has physical impacts on the brain. So thank you so much for that. What I do just want to say as an ending comment is that I know we do make jokes about spanking kids and things like that, but just be aware that corporal punishment includes the parent-child relationship as well, and it is considered a criminal offense in South Africa. We are moving away from having children fear us to children wanting to be disciplined from a place of respect instead of a place from fear. And we do know the impact of violence on a child, and it does go into the adult space as well. All right, so just keep that in
Thank you,
mind.
Pedro.
Thank you very much, everyone. Have a lovely evening, and
Thank
I'll
you.
see you guys next time.
Thank you and have a lovely
Okey-doke.
evening too. Good night.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Good night. Thanks, everyone. Good night. Bye.